Kelly Kearney with Starry Constellation Magazine, and with me today is an actor, a producer, a writer, a director of the new queer stoner meta comedy, Extremely Unique Dynamic. Welcome, quadruple Hollywood threat, Harrison Hsu. How are you doing, Harrison?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much. I watched this movie last night and I loved it. You co-star with Ivan Leung, and you wrote this along with Ivan and Catherine Dudas. You wrote, directed, produced, and starred in it. What inspired the idea for this as two young actors and stoners kind of getting together to create this meta film about two young actors, stoners creating a meta film? Was it a personal story or did it stem from something else?
Yeah, a lot of it actually stemmed from our real lives. Ivan and I have been friends for over 10 years, and we met in acting class. We've primarily been actors. And last year, I was about to move from LA to Canada. So we figured it's our last year together. Why don't we create something together? So that's how this movie initially came about. But right before that, we had just been working together on the marketing campaign for this movie called Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. And it was our first time actually working together, and we got along really well. And we figured that we'd be a great pair for directing, writing, and acting in this together. And also another movie that I talked to Starry Constellation about a couple years ago called Last Summer of Nathan Lee. Um, Being part of that process and seeing how that film was made really did inspire me to take that leap into directing and writing as well.
Oh wow, I love that. What I really liked about this movie is it had this sort of frenetic energy. It managed to balance these many layers very well and kind of put a modern take on it. Which filmmakers or films have influenced you over the years that kind of set your style, your narrative style the best?
Yeah, I feel like as new filmmakers, we're still kind of discovering our own style, but there's been so many influences for both of us heading into this movie. Our editor worked on Pen 15, and that was a show that both of us really loved, and we loved that comedic style and
It was a
timing.
great show.
Yeah, Pen 15 is incredible. And then growing up too, I watched a lot of Adam Sandler movies. That's just what I grew up on. Happy Gilmore, Billy Madison, and not to say our movies that at all, but a lot of um, that type of filmmaking where Adam's just creating stuff with his friends and they keep
Mhm.
making comedy after comedy really resonated with us. And then also too, of course, like Harold and Kumar was such a great influence for us too, because that was the first Asian stoner comedy, and it really paved the way for actors like us to be able to create our own Asian stoner comedy.
It's funny because you guys mentioned that a couple times in the movie, and it made me laugh because it was like a little kind of Easter egg about that. But one of my favorite parts of the film is the scene about breaking stereotypes. You talk a bit about your own. Can you talk a little bit about your own experience as an Asian American actor and how it reflects what Danny and Ryan went through, especially in competing for roles, facing casting microaggressions, and maybe feeling the pressure to kind of break those stereotypes for the community as a whole.
Yeah, I first started acting 15 years ago, and when I first started acting, the roles that I was going out for were very stereotypical, whether it was a geek or a martial artist, or you were always like Asian plus something. Like you couldn't just
Right.
exist as an Asian person. And then 6, 7 years ago with Crazy Rich Asians, that really opened it up for more opportunities for Asian Americans to be in leading roles, and especially as love interests. But then it created this wave of like, you had Shang-Chi, you had Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like you had all these really amazing roles for Asian Americans, but they were now seen as like these super hot, sexy
Yes.
people, which is awesome. But the pendulum swung so hard in the other direction that like there's all these people in between that still don't really have representation in media. So that's where with this film we really wanted to create an opportunity for both me and Ivan to exist in this movie together, because for the longest time we never had that opportunity, because you have one Asian person in a role in a film or a TV show and you've checked that diversity box. But you
Right.
have two Asian people, it's like, oh, that's a lot. Like, I don't know if we can do two. So that's where for us, like this movie was really important because we wanted to showcase us as actors in a comedic role that also had the opportunity to tap into the dramatic side and show nuance. And yeah, that was really important to us.
I also think what you mentioned, a lot of times casting directors will say, "Oh, we have one Asian, that's enough." They'll do the same thing with
Yeah,
gay people and queer people. Just one, two, then it becomes like a queer centric show
yeah,
or a queer centric movie. You managed to do both in this movie
yeah,
unapologetically. So, congrats to you. And I'm sure plenty of Asian Americans and Asian Canadians would love to see themselves reflected on screen. And that's such an important process in filmmaking. And I think you guys nailed that.
thank
One
you.
of one of my other favorite scenes was that big emotional scene between Danny and Ryan. How
Hmm.
did you guys prepare for that? It was so intense, and how did you kind of decompress from that afterwards? Did you guys do rehearsals beforehand?
Yeah, so a lot of the movie has improvised dialogue in it.
Mm.
That one particular scene was fully scripted because we wanted to make sure that we really got what we wanted to get across out. And that scene was a little intense because Ivan and I, we're really good friends, but we never fight. So that was really hard to get into that space. And, the movie's meta because they're heightened versions of ourselves. So in that argument scene, we wanted to bring as much humanity and as much of ourselves into that as possible, but also at the same time, because we're playing versions of ourselves, it was scary going there because it's like, no, I don't actually mean this, like
Right.
it's just my character. So it requires a lot of trust, and that's where having a partner like Ivan was so important because we had that trust and that working relationship. Because doing something like that with someone you don't have that trust with could be really difficult. So I am very grateful to have had the opportunity to work with Ivan on it.
And not scripted. I kind of felt like some of it wasn't scripted. It felt so natural, like two friends
Yeah,
having conversations, arguing about what their views are on how they're going to take a scene. And I'm guessing that the lines blurred a little bit, and sometimes it was a little bit difficult to
yeah.
keep those lines straight a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Because there aren't a lot of things that mirror our lives, right? Like I was moving from LA to Canada while we were shooting the movie, and I was engaged at the time, and now I'm married. And a lot of the things that we brought into our conversations, like for example, getting high while doing taxes, like that scene, like very much did happen in real life.
That's hilarious.
So yeah, it was hard to keep all the meta layers in check too at times because uh sometimes it's like the characters talking about something that those characters aren't actually talking about because they don't want to like talk about it because it's too uncomfortable. So oftentimes like when we're watching it back we're like, wait, was that the characters or the characters or the characters?
It's
So
like
yeah,
an
there was a lot to
inception.
keep
It's
on.
like meta inception, this film. There's so many
Yeah,
layers. There's three characters with two people playing them, but you guys are also sort of the characters. It's a lot. One of the
yeah.
things I really loved about it was the childhood footage of the best
Mm,
friends. It added so much depth to the characters. It showed both of your love of film and good times, having fun, but also love of each other. What was it like working
yeah.
with the two younger actors who played both Danny and Ryan?
Oh, it was incredible. When we first cast them, so Ivan knew an acting coach who mostly dealt with kids, and he was like, "These are all the kids I have that could potentially play you two." We looked at their photos, and we're like, based off their photos, I think these two would be a great match. And we kind of took a swing on it. And when they came in person, we were like, "Oh wow, like they're exactly like we are." So it ended up working out perfectly. But the two kids hadn't worked together before. They kind of knew each other from acting class, but they weren't friends. So the first 30 minutes was just us getting them comfortable. We were just playing games with them and letting them be kids. And we gave them like the DV camera, and they hadn't seen that. They didn't know what it was. So like we kind of had to explain like, okay, like this is how you do it. You look through this hole and this is how you look at the playback footage. And then after we got through the initial awkward phases of like kids meeting kids, it was just a lot of fun. We just let them be themselves and run free. And like there's certain amazing moments that I love in the movie. Like they're playing tic tac toe while like blowing steam on the glass, and like that's all stuff that they came up with themselves, just like
Oh, wow.
having fun and creating.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so they kind of put their own little ad libs or their own little, going off script in there to kind of make it really realistic.
Oh yeah, like we gave them scenarios. We were like, "Hey, you two have your best friends. You're just filming fun content." And then they would riff too. They would improvise, and like at first we fed them some lines, but then they just started having fun and being themselves, and that was where the joy came and the magic came. And we were just capturing like, just do whatever you want, just like be yourselves, and it was so magical to see.
You probably have a lot that fell on the editing room floor when you were done with all of this because of so much extra footage you probably shot.
Yeah, we shot a lot with the kids, and we actually shot a lot with ourselves too, because there was a lot of improv in the movie. So we shot with two cameras at once, and we would riff off each other for sometimes 8 to 10 minute takes. And um, if you looked at the footage, the dailies, you could probably cut a whole different movie. I mean, it would still be the same film. Like we would still go through the same emotional beats, and each scene would still end and start the same way. But we talked about things in certain takes that didn't make it into the footage. Like for example, Danny's character has this obsession with Kaylee Cuoco, and it was this running joke that like went throughout the movie, and it unfortunately didn't make it in. But that's kind of how it goes with shooting a lot of improv. Is you kind of have to puzzle piece it together. So if you remove it from one scene, you have to remove it from the other. So
Yeah.
yeah, there was a lot that didn't make it in.
I love that. Like I mentioned earlier, you wore four hats in making this film,
Yeah.
big responsibility. So let's break that down a little bit. What was the process like writing and storyboarding a three-layer meta stoner comedy? How were you able to keep track of all of those things and know who was involved in what drama at what time and who was saying what?
Yeah. So the outlining process was very it was fun, but also it kind of mirrored in a meta way our characters because Ivan still doesn't understand the meta-ness of it. Like I still have to explain to him, like, no, this character is this character is this. Um, but in a way, like as we were building it and we were writing the outline, my character or me I understood the meta-ness, he didn't. So then we were like, oh wait, that should be then part of the storyline. But in terms of like keeping everything in check, uh, it was difficult because we were writers, directors, producers, and actors. So that's why we brought on a third director slash writer, Catherine Dudas. So she was super helpful because when Ivan and I were in scenes together, she would be the one behind the camera with our producer Noel, checking out the takes, making sure everything was running smoothly. Um, so the way that we shot it was very unconventional because you don't get many movies with three directors. But for us, we just felt like being in the scene together, and we're in almost every scene. It was necessary to have a third pair of eyes.
Yeah. And how did you approach working with such a small team, both on set and behind the scenes, ensuring that everyone stayed on the creative page? Did you have like a process that you went through to make sure that everyone was, approaching a scene from the right place and the right character that they were supposed to be talking about? Because it is so meta that it can kind of overlap very easily.
Yeah. I mean, it was a really small cast and crew, but in a way, it kind of felt like a family too. Everyone wore a bunch of different hats, and I think that's where having that third person and the producer on set every day helping us, that was really helpful because at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, we just recapped everything that happened. All right, like we just shot this layer of meta. Now, like the next day, we're transitioning into this layer, and we gotta get this, and just all being on the same page and just having many touch bases throughout was instrumental. Because yeah, like it would have been very easy to get lost in the
Yeah.
sauce of the meta.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Especially when it's also sort of based on your own relationships, your own friendship and how things were going.
Yeah,
You can really get lost in the realness of all of that. What
yeah.
advice would you give to aspiring filmmakers about balancing those roles of writer, producer, and director effectively?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was really important having such a great collaborator as Ivan because it's really hard to do everything yourself. I know tons of people do it, and for me, I just felt like for this particular project, I really needed that person to partner with to get this film across the finish line. But for others, if you're planning on doing it yourself, I would say like lean into your resources, like whether it's producer friends, actor friends, writer friends, because it's really hard to do everything yourself. And oftentimes, I think even when I was working with Ivan, you can get a little tunnel visioned at times, and sometimes you just need to take a step back and like ask for outside input, because other people will see things in a way that you might not see it because you've just been in it so much. And when it's your baby, when you've written it, directed it, produced it, especially if you're acting in it too, when people talk about your movie, it kind of feels like they're talking about you in a way because it's your
Yeah,
project
personal.
and it's you on screen. It's very personal. So that's where having that outside opinion, I think, is really helpful and just leaning on your resources.
It's funny because Ryan in the film also was very tunnel vision about what
Yeah.
he wanted, and to make it work, he did have to reach out to Ivan and be like,
Yeah.
let's have your sense in this as well. And so that's funny. It's so meta that it's even meta in your process
Wow.
of making the movie.
I know. I didn't even think about that, but as you said that, I was like, wow, isn't that so meta?
It really is. It really is. Well, what message do you hope the movie sends to fans when they leave the theater? What do you hope they're thinking about?
Honestly, I hope that people see this movie and feel inspired to make their own films because we didn't have that much with our film, right? It's one location, it's mostly two actors, and we were able to just lean on character relationship and story to get this movie out there. And I think as a filmmaker, when you're first starting out, it's really daunting to make a film because you think, oh, it's going to cost a lot of money, it's going to take a lot of time. And I feel like a lot of people never make it past the idea stage because they just sit on ideas. They're like maybe one day when I'm ready, I'll make this movie, or it has to be perfect. And I think when you start the process of making a film and you have that momentum, just carry on with it because that's how you get movies made. If you overthink it or you strive for perfection, sometimes you get in your own way. And I think you just sometimes have to remember that making movies is fun and you can do it with a lot less than you think you need.
Absolutely. And now this movie, you shopped it around, you got it in all the festivals that meant something, and now theatrical release, you took a risk and it paid off.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What's next for you? Are there any projects in the future that we can look out for?
Yeah. So Ivan and I shot a movie in Lake Tahoe called Near Death. I'm smiling because the director is right there. um, so yeah,
Make
it's
sure you mention it.
yeah, Near Death, directed by Shayna Aiden. Maybe you could get her on this podcast next year. But yeah, no, it's really exciting. Ivan and I are just acting in it, but it was nice to be able to take a step back, um, and not be involved as directors, writers, producers, and just act again. Because
Yeah,
it is so much work just taking your film and like carrying it to the finish line that we needed a little bit of a break. So it was a really nice moment to just remember, like, oh yeah, like we're actors too, and we could just be on set and have a great time and not be completely as invested as we were in our current project.
absolutely. And lastly, what would you like to say to the fans of this film? Because it's in theaters now, people are watching it, they're liking it, they saw it in the festival circuit, they loved it.
Yeah.
What would you like to say to them of the film, fans of your film, and of you and your work?
I would say watch it. No, I mean honestly, I just really appreciate the fans for like listening to this podcast. Hopefully it inspires you to also make your own films or support other independent films as well, because there's so much content out there and studios churn out movie after movie for big budgets, and there's a lot of filmmakers out there that make lower budget content that's fantastic that just never gets out there. So I just encourage people to discover other indie films as well, and if you like it, tell your friends about it. Our film will be available on digital on January 29th, which depending on when this podcast comes out, it'll probably be out. So check it
Yeah,
out on Amazon, iTunes, Google, Fandango, and if you like it, yeah, tell your friends.
it's still in theaters right now as well. It came out January 10th and it's still in theaters. So
Yeah.
fans, check your listings. Go check this out. If you have an Asian American friend, drag them along. They definitely want to see it. But you should go see it as well because it really is eye opening to maybe some things that you didn't notice about that community. And you can be a little kinder about maybe casting directors and things like that. And not pinning people in, stereotypical roles. I think that was a really important lesson to be learned in the film.
Yeah,
Besides the fact that it was a laugh riot, very funny and very heartfelt. So thank you so much for talking with me today. I wish you the best of luck with this film. I think it's a genuine piece of indie film that I think appeals to a lot of people, and I hope to see you again making something even
awesome.
better. Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I'm going to stop now, and then I will let you guys know when it's going to be.